So welcome everybody to the last live session of your 2-month learning journey with the Global Case Study Challenge. Thank you so much for the lovely comments leaving in the chat. Thrilled, but a little bit sad after 2 months. That is really good to hear the last session. There is a lot of
excitement.
Massimiliano, we like your enthusiasm. Thank you very much for joining. So what was happening? You worked in global virtual teams. You did virtual teamworks, virtual team building activities. You reflected on them. You had a great presentation during the Global Virtual Conference, and you handed in your submissions. And you know, next week, the grades of your written submissions will be released. And what are we going to do today? So you know that, of course, learning, experiencing is super important when we or experiencing aspect is very important when we talk about learning, but learning without reflecting or experiencing without reflecting upon it is only half of the thing. And that is why we built in a virtual live session, a debrief session with international managers. And you have already seen a big applause at this point with us on the stage. We have Joshua Davis, we have Torsten Collins here, we have Thierry Croix, and we have Berta San Martin connecting from Spain, from many different countries. Thierry from Luxembourg? No,
Belgium. Don't mix us, please. Don't mix us.
Oh, Denmark, Silicon Valley. We have Joshua connecting from Singapore, Hong Kong. God, it's always Mamma mia.
2 months in, 2 months in, we're tired. We're tired
totally.
too.
We as well. Ethne, give a few welcoming words, please.
Yeah, it's lovely to see everybody. Considering this is also an optional part of the Global Case Study Challenge program, we're absolutely delighted to see so many of you here. It's so valuable. Barbara's already talked about the importance of reflection and then also the learning transfer component afterwards. So we really hope that you take your journey with us even further. And maybe just a comment, we know your grades are coming out next week, but it's not only about the grading, is it, Sveta? What is it always about? More than just the grades?
We always comment on the fact that this is the end of the journey. It's evaluation, it's certificate, but also it's reflection and how you present this information later in your careers. That's the reason why we have people from real careers who will be sharing this information about the virtual team management today.
But we have real careers too, right, Sveta? Better careers. Anna, would you like to also say a quick hello?
Definitely. We always refer to this session as the most important one. And we even say that it's like kind of a celebration already. So definitely after that, you should be starting a celebration of the end of your virtual learning journey with us. And, just recently, just to highlight, I was reading the reflection of one of your educators that was participating. And there was written that some students agreed to meet in a real life, and for me it was the most thrilling component as well, because it means that the trust was built and you really are willing to continue your collaboration or friendship or any kind of new type of activities. Maybe you will start up a company. Who knows, right?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So we're going to jump directly into the conversation, into the panel with our expert speakers. And I think one of the first questions that also was brought to us, we should ask it and start with that question, is how to overcome challenges in different motivations of my remote team. Because what we experience always in the Global Case Study Challenge, and what I also experience in real life when I'm working, whether in an in-presence setting or in a virtual setting, is that of course motivations are differing between the team members. And there is also this, do you remember we talked about it in the first live session, the out of sight and out of mind syndrome. So how do you deal with that? And I'm going to our panelists, and I know Torsten, you are leading a global team of people dispersed across the globe, different age groups, different backgrounds as well. So how do you deal with that different motivations in your teams?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think for those of you I haven't met before, I have a company based in San Francisco that started off all being in the same office, but I think gradually over the past 5 years, actually before COVID, sort of became a more distributed organization, and we now have people in Mexico City, in North Carolina, in Europe, in various other places. And so different time zones, different types of people, as you said, and different cultures. And I think all of that is a challenge. So I think, there's a lot. I could talk for an hour about the subject, and I will spare you all. but essentially, I think when you are not in the same room, people get it's just naturally demotivating. As there's nothing, or rather, I'd say when you are in the same room, it's naturally motivating to people to be around other people that are passionate about the same, vision or path, or being part of the same project. And so you have to, as a manager, counteract that very actively. And I think that's I hadn't understood that before I made that transition myself in this organization, from how much natural motivation you get out of being in the same room with everybody else. So we really had to change a lot of things in order to make sure that we included people and didn't sort of lose people's motivation along the way. It depends a lot what type of organization you're in, and a lot of other things. But maybe I'll leave it there as an opener. It's a really interesting problem and something that you have to be very proactive about as a manager.
Thank you so much, Torsten, for giving us your perspective as a CEO of a global company. Joshua, I do know that you're working with global teams as well. What is it that you are doing, or what is it that you are suggesting team leaders, for example, to sort of counteract the out of sight, out of mind syndrome? Or what are you doing with your team?
That's a good question as well. It actually builds off a lot of what Torsten's been saying. And he is absolutely right. It does depend on the type of company, on the type of situation that you're going in. There's always that triangle of culture, context, and character that we need to be considering. But at the same time, there are a few predictable elements. To Torsten's point, there is a lot of natural collaborations that happens to face. And so, we've got sort of this planned collaboration, but also this collaboration that happens in those liminal spaces around the water cooler or around the coffee shop. And so it's that question of, how can we recreate some of those liminal spaces in a virtual environment? So one of the big things for actually leveling out the motivation is, to some extent, making it visible. And this goes down on the macro level, whether you're capturing this on a collaborative Miro board or something like that, or in some other way. But it just, to the extent that you're actually making the motivations visible to other people, is really, really a critical element of this. And to that end, even like on the smallest level, how we run our meetings can really, really impact motivation very, very heavily. If you've got a series of topic-oriented meetings where it's nothing but a bunch of report outs, that's bad face-to-face, quite simply. Mm-hmm. But the danger of it is massively magnified virtually, because distractions are everywhere. We go into webinar mode and we go check our emails, do something else. So it's about maintaining that. At the same time, we don't want to micromanage people, because part of what this more flexible work environment's allowing us to do is to work within our own best spaces. So it's that way of that balance of creating visibility, of creating momentum through meaningful meetings where actual discussions are occurring, that can really build into that positive momentum and positive motivation, regardless of where we're coming from. Yeah.
Joshua, let me pick here on one thing, because I'm a big fan of Working Out Loud by John Stepper. And there's also another, it's also Visible Teamwork. Pilar Orti calls it Visible Teamwork, together with Maya Middlemiss. And how is that helping a team? Maybe you could just dive a little bit deeper into that.
So in the stuff that we do, I do a lot of stuff, this idea, we call it physical place. It's 9 p.m. on a Friday in Hong Kong. So every once in a while, you'll see my brain drift off slightly. Just FYI, I tend to be a very early morning person. But I'm a big believer in this idea of physical places and digital spaces. And to your point, not the books you were mentioning, but we do a lot of stuff from like Harvard's visible thinking model. And it's exactly that thing of, if we're having a conversation, one of the biggest problems, it's a problem face to face, but it's magnified virtually. If we say something, everything that's being created by the team is siloed off into little tiny boxes. We say something and it's forgotten, it's dropped. We say something, it's forgotten, it's dropped. And we have to really have incredible conscious attention to come back to those pieces. But if we map them out, if we physically put them onto a Miro board or other structures or strategies, things don't get lost and people can actually feel the direction we're all moving together. Does that answer your question, Barbara?
Oh,
very interesting. You also introduced me just to a new tool. Thanks so much. I never heard about that Harvard tool. Maybe you can also type it briefly into the chat, because I work mainly with working out loud or visible teamwork. Super cool. Thanks a lot, Joshua. But also, Joshua, you mentioned one thing, and maybe Berta, I'm sort of asking that to you now. Joshua mentioned also the aspect of virtual meetings, and all of our learners here have been in virtual meetings throughout their teamwork of the past 2 months. Some of them might have been better, some of them might have not been managed properly, and people were drifting away. If you think about that from a learning and development perspective, what is it that characterizes for you a good virtual meeting?
Okay, so first of all, I think, and I think we discussed something like this, maybe in LinkedIn last week or something like that, having different roles. Why? Because especially when we're having a virtual meeting, we don't have those roles so naturally. They need to be established somehow, maybe because I prefer to be the one that moderates the meeting. Another person has to be the timekeeper. Another person has to be the one taking notes for the whole meeting. And the one that it's moderating actually may need to help everyone to feel included. That's very important in a virtual meeting, that nobody else is left behind. So maybe we can not only have our cameras on, which is much better for nonverbal communication, but also having the chat being used. Like, okay, maybe I don't feel so comfortable sharing my picture, my camera, and speaking out loud, but I feel comfortable when doing some polls or adding some comments in the chat. So all these ideas help to build a more psychologically safe environment in virtual meetings. Trying that in the company for the last months, not only in global virtual teams during the pandemic, but before also, and it helps a lot. Like, that's the generic thing. And if you let me say something else about motivation, because of what Torsten and Joshua were sharing was really interesting, I may share also a tool by Management 3.0, which are moving motivators and are great to help people understand what motivates you to take a decision, to decide your career in a company or stuff like that. So I share it in the chat.
Super, super cool. I already shared the Management 3.0, and I'm also a big fan. I work a lot with Management 3.0 with companies and with managers themselves, and look at the moving motivators. You look at also the Nico calendar, which is a nice tool to see motivation, exactly what we're talking about, motivation in your virtual team. Thanks a lot, Berta, for adding that important aspect. Thierry, so let me also ask you your perspective about out of sight, out of mind. What would be your take on that in virtual collaboration?
Well, for me, being an introvert, being out of sight, it's great for me. And so far, if I can avoid seeing people, my life is great. No, but more seriously, I really try, and that's what I do with my teams. I try to avoid meetings. I try to avoid meets virtually. Why? Because we did realize at a certain point that what we became is just a free space on your Outlook agenda. And what people do is, oh, there it's free, let's put an hour. There it's free, let's put in another hour. And those meetings became less and less productive, and people were less and less involved in meetings. So what we did, and certainly now with COVID, that sentence that says it could have been an email is so true today. And the first thing I think that I try to do is, if we can avoid a meeting, let's avoid it. If you can avoid to have to meet people, turn your camera on, start talking and being there, just listening for hours, let's do that. And so we really try to reduce the amount of virtual meetings to just what's necessary. And even in the length of the meeting, because per default, when you look at it, everybody will put 1 hour because, yeah, Outlook does 1 hour. So let's block 1 hour. Nope. First of all, never book an hour. I try to never book an hour. It's 50 minutes. So you have 10 minutes before the next one to go, grab your coffee, go to the bathroom, whatever. And what about 15 minutes meeting? What about 10 minutes meeting? What about just 30 or 25 minutes meeting? So for me, I think that's because of virtual thing, and because we had all to improvise, because when the COVID came, it was like from one day to another, we need to find solutions. So everybody goes on virtual things, and we were not really prepared. Everybody rushed into filling that agenda, also to show everybody that, hey, look, I'm working, okay, guys? Look, my day is fully busy, so don't think for a second that I'm just playing with my PlayStation, okay? Look, I'm full. And because of that, those meetings, it became part of the landscape. So you don't even care about the meetings, and you have a lot of more and more people just coming to meetings and turning the camera off and doing something else. As you said, Thorsten, it's really okay. I will just listen with one ear what's happening, and my brain will just react to some keywords. For example, my name, and that's it. So
yeah. Thank you so much.
Could I hop in here as well? That's really interesting. And I know that you can also give us more insights, Thierry, into the psychology of, motivation in the online space and how to manage ourselves. But just to go back to this question of, being introverted or more introverted, we talk a lot about trying to make virtual spaces more inclusive. Could you, and so you try to avoid meetings, but is there any other way you could, identify very productive spaces for work that are really inclusive, and how do you see those spaces? That's what I'd quite like to know.
Okay, for those spaces, indeed, we have a lot of tools that we use, and it's funny because those last 2 years we saw a lot of new tools coming on the market, like there is a new way to collaboratively work, and we did realize that the more tools we have, the less we use them. Because, and on our side here at NTT, it's not a startup, so it's a big corporate machine where everybody is focused on Microsoft Teams, PowerPoint, and Word. And we accepted Miro because it seemed that became like a tool it's part of the family now. In the beginning, it was like the weird cousin, but now, it's the funny cousin that we can use. But working out loud, by example, everybody will think it's super cool when you show it, and then no one will use it. So what we had to do on our side, we really tried to reduce the amount of tools and to not take the collaborative tool like the Holy Bible and the Holy Truth and the answer. No, let's try to find ways to not add more tools to the day-to-day routine of the people, and mostly how can we use what you have and you use every day to make it more collaborative. And so Teams, by example, is something that we use as much, but as really a collaborative tool as Miro, by example.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is this whole question of tools and tools overload is certainly very interesting also for our students who have been experiencing different formats and different tools and platforms. Maybe, Thorsten, I can pass the question on to you. Do you also have this sort of reduced use of tools for your general communication? And if so, what are some of your favorites?
Yeah, and I think Thierry is absolutely right here that is tools overload is really a bad thing. I remember when my team or a couple of people on my team started using Slack, was way early at the time where pretty much no one had heard of it, including myself. And we were trying to, myself and a couple of managers were trying to implement other ways that they would communicate. And at that point I was like, well, it doesn't really matter if they like Slack. I don't really care if it's exactly like the feature set or whatever we're looking for. I was like, great, let's just go with that. And let's make sure that becomes the thing that everybody uses. And to this day is the cornerstone of how YouNoodle communicates. And I think it's just kind of very symbolic that the cornerstone of our infrastructure today was not chosen by me or by management. And I think that's somewhat of a good sign. But yes, absolutely. We're not on Teams. We're very much in the Google space. So everything Google G Suite, Google Meet, Slides, all the collaborative features. It's not that Google's amazing, it's just a choice, again, about making sure what you have is something that everybody uses. So yes, and I think, there's also something about these, I get kind of triggered by the meeting. I've always had the policy of let's get rid of meetings. Everybody else seems to create meetings, and my job as the CEO is to get rid of meetings. And I think that's, can sometimes cause a little conflict. But I really mean that. And I think when you move from a physical setting to a virtual setting, you kind of have, in a physical meeting, let's say you're all in the same office, you all go into the meeting room, and it's like, that's part of the experiences, everybody's there and we're doing the same thing. So it's kind of okay that the content is not as amazing. But if you all go to a Zoom call, we're not going to pay attention. Again, much to today's point here, we're not going to pay attention if this is not way better than how the same content would have flown, in a meeting room. So one of the principles, for instance, is that we never do status meetings. Anything that's like black or white, zeros or ones, has to be on Slack or something else. Meetings are for the gray areas. So meetings are for the areas where we have to discuss. It's like, oh, this client here has this problem. We don't really know how to deal with this. We have this strategic issue where that discussion is important. That's where you want to gather people for. Never have like an agenda of I have to go through this, and update everybody about all this stuff. And that, I think, it's a very simple principle. It's very hard to do in practice, of course, but that's one of many such, I think, tools that we're using.
Wonderful. Joshua, you're agreeing also in the chat. Would you like to comment as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's honestly to reiterate and run with what Torsten's saying and what Thierry is saying. There was a questionable human being, but really great Churchill quote, we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. And it's this idea that we create spaces, and then the spaces we create determine the kind of conversations that happen there. If you have like a status update meeting, you're going to create a terribly boring space. And adding a bunch of bling, a bunch of fancy tools here and there, to Thierry's point, doesn't make for a good meeting. It's all about how you're actually shaping the meeting. My favorite ever was they had this, it's actually a declassified, oh no, that's not the right one, declassified sabotage manual, where literally Thierry knows what I'm about to say. It was, so predates the CIA, the OSS, and they literally were trying to encourage people to have meetings of 8 people or more in countries that they were attacking, because the moment they had meetings of 8 or more, the efficiency dropped to such a level that they no longer were able to get stuff done. So it was actually a sabotage technique. And yet we are constantly self-sabotaging. So it's this question of how do we actually use a minimal number of tools to create deeper conversations. I would say that things like Miro, I would tend to lean having like one of those is good, because the kind of conversations you can shape there in terms of the working out loud, visible thinking, the pros outweigh the cons there. Plus, to that introversion, Thierry's point of disappearing to the background, a lot of times if we don't have that sort of collaborative tool, it becomes a meeting of loudership rather than leadership. So it's just the noisiest voices getting heard, whereas we can actually have space for quiet reflection, for the democratization of ideas, if we've got some sort of collaborative space we can use. So that's the one tool I would add to like the basic toolkit, but I do agree with Thierry and Torsten, keep it as simple as possible to get the job done.
And maybe just before we leave that question, Beate, you've already talked to us a little bit about that, but in a learning and development setting, what tools are you relying on as part of the corporate university? Does it differ depending on the size of the groups, the size of the teams, or the individuals that you're doing training with?
Well, actually, to add some different approach, I would say that regarding video call meetings, for example, we couldn't use for trainings Microsoft Teams at the beginning, because it's not recognized as a learning tool. It's recognized as a team tool. Yeah. So actually, we needed to use maybe Zoom, but it wasn't welcome in every company because of the policies. Maybe then we moved to Blackboard Collaborate, which was being used in many different universities, for example. And well, so we had to try different ones until we chose one. So That's from the learning approach. And I may say also that apart from choosing and agreeing on one tool and keeping it as simple as possible, as you were saying, guys, I will also add to have a common chat. No matter the tool we're using, have a common chat for maybe for a bit of team building, you know, like just here, we're not sharing things about work. We're just sharing the joke of the day, saying hello in the morning, my morning, and your morning as well. You know, like whenever you it and stuff like that, because it helps to keep the team together. It makes the glue in the team.
Well, I think with the Global Case Study Challenge team, it feels like we're almost living together, even though we've never met all as a virtual team. We've never met together, the four of us. Barbara, yeah, but Barbara keeps us under control in terms of the amount of team tools that we use, right?
Well, I'm trying to do my best, but we're also always struggling, because finding out what are the tools that work for us as a team can, of course, be something very different that works for another team. So we're also always trying to check into what are the tools that we're using and how are we using them? How do we agree on using them? And I think this is also one of the questions, and maybe some of you in your virtual teams, you thought about that. What were your team agreements on how are you using each tool? How are you using each communication channel? So this maybe at this point is a question for you here in the audience, all our learners. If you think about the teams, if you think about your team agreements, have you talked about how are you using the different communication tools? What response time are you expecting from each other? So who did that? Put a yes into there, or a kind of an emoji, a green check into the chat window, or a yes. And who did not have that, put something, a no or a red cross into the chat. Let's check out.
Or crying faces.
Yeah. Into the chat, yes or no. Did you have any sort of agreements on tools, on tools or channels?
So I think the interesting thing with such a global participation group is that not everything is accessible to everybody either. So in some teams, I know that there was certainly some limitation also in terms of which tools you can use. But it's nice to see, yeah, a lot of yeses, because we did recommend that at the beginning, I think.
Yeah,
in the
I was
first
thinking
session.
the same. I was thinking the same, Ethna, really. Fantastic. We were already touching upon the aspect, right, Ethne, of also time zone challenges. So we had that, and also the communication aspect. You know that our Global Case Study Challenge, we have literally learners from 16 different countries, from as far as Malaysia, India, to Colombia and the United States. So of course, time zones is one of the big challenges. Thierry, maybe we can continue with you. If you think about the teams that you're working in, and if you think about communication, you were already saying you want to reduce meetings, but how do you deal with time zones and time zone differences if you are in a meeting? Or if you want to set up a meeting, sorry.
Well, first of all, we need to make the difference between a time zone and a process. What I mean is, if you look at the time zone as just a logistic problem, then you're screwed. Because when you work in different time zone, it means that you work with different cultures, you work with different mindsets. Working in Hong Kong is not the same as working in Panama, or working in New York, or working here in Brussels or in Madrid. So the time zone is not only just a logistic problem, it's also a mindset. When I was with my client in New York, their way of working, their way of starting the day, their way of starting a meeting is not the same as when I have a meeting with Barcelona. Okay, and I'm not talking about a Spanish way, because that's something else. But so the first thing that I try to do is not looking at a time zone, but what kind of people I will work with. What is the mindset of the people that I'm now working with? And the issue is when you try to put all those different mindsets together, because then you need to find that common ground that fits everybody. Now, regarding the tool that we use for communication, in that case. There is also one thing that I think is important here. I hear a lot of things at the beginning that we're focusing on the tool itself. Well, what tool do you propose? What do you think? Personally, I always arrived in projects where the team already exists. And in the beginning, I was also coming, okay, we will use that tool, we'll use that tool. And it was a mess because first of all, before focusing on a tool, you should first focus on the team and use what works and understand when you arrive in a project, okay, what do you do now? What works? And let's keep what's working and let's try to improve what's not. And only find a tool to fix what is not working. And if it's a communication problem, then okay, let's try to find the right tool in order to make it work. Okay, and there, let's be honest, we have on the market a lot of tools, but we will all come back with the same. I mean, if we need a video call, we will use Google, Teams, Microsoft, or Slack, and that's it. I mean, even if there are a lot of other things, but the first thing is not focusing on tools, it's focusing on a team. And from there, identifying what works. Because if something works, please don't change it. I mean, because you have that dynamic within the team that works perfectly. And because, yeah, they are not you. Because that's also what we do as a leader or manager when we come up on a project is we think that everybody has the same motivation as we have. And we think that they all see the things the same way I see it. I'm the manager, come on, I'm super motivated. You should be. Okay, let's go. That tool is great. I think it's great. So you should find it's great too. I mean, we tried spatial chat. I don't know if someone of you knows that platform. It's funny. I mean, there's a lot of gimmick where you can move and speak to people. It's great. And with one of my colleague, Carlos, we were trying it and it was like, oh, that's so cool. There's a pool. Yeah, and you can talk about around the pool and it's great. Yeah, and we tried it to push in our team and said, guys, that tool is great. And they were just looking at us like, what?
Really?
Yeah, okay. It lasts 2 weeks and we never used it again. And so that's the thing. Before focusing on a tool, focus on the people. And when you have different time zone, it's not just logistic, it's also mindset. And yeah, once you have all the elements in the equation, then try to find the best way to communicate. If you work with Germany, believe me, don't try to have 3 hours meeting just for a yes or no session, okay? And if you go to Spain and you speak with Spanish people, it's impossible to have just a 10 minutes call. Okay, but that's something that you need to take into consideration while you try to communicate with different time zone and different people. I lost myself a bit in the question, but
no, but that's fantastic because it's important to just add the culture component, because as you were saying, it's not just about time zones. Time zones might make it more complicated to really find the moment when you talk to your team. But of course, what is behind time zones is that we're talking about different cultures and cultural differences. Let me just pick up on the tool, Thierry, and I'm going for the others here. I'm also going to put it into the chat immediately because it might be a tool that you want to check out, because I really like spatial chat. It's like Kumo Space or Wonder. It is a tool which is very different to Zoom, and I know that some groups here were using also such tools where you pop in and you walk around, and the moment that more than 2 people come close to each other, pop, a video call pops up. I'm going to post there into the Moodle platform as well, those tools that you can try out for free. And I love working with them with the virtual teams, because particularly for coffee meetings or something else, it's really nice to have maybe a different layout or to test out a different layout. But as Thierry was saying, and he's totally right, it's not about the tool, it's about the team. And when we talk about the team, Berta, you are our intercultural expert consultant here, learning and development expert as well. So when we talk about cultural differences, how would you deal with, or what would your suggestion be on how to manage cultural differences in virtual teams? What is the one recommendation that you would give here?
If I have,
or 2 or 3, you can also go up to 3. Sorry,
okay,
that was really strict.
Maybe that's my Spanish mindset. You know, I cannot only say one, but maybe first of all, I will say open mindset. Like, okay, things are not as you think they are. So just ask people in your team, how do they like things to be? How do they need things to be? And let's build agreements on that. Okay, because maybe regarding the time zones you were mentioning before, we can set common hours to be together, to be all connected, because those are the hours where we can have the meetings or stuff like that. But apart from that, we need to be comfortable, no matter on if I'm Spanish, if you're from Belgium, if you're from Singapore, or however. So it's just, how would you be comfortable working here, working all together? And ask people, let people share their own needs. Just
I think it's a very interesting aspect that you're mentioning here. It's like building up how your own profiles, like telling others, how do you want how it is easy to work with me, for example, what you're suggesting, right? Or how communication is for me, how I prefer it to be. Joshua, I'm not sure if you have seen, I think on Miro, there are even templates for those personal profiles to be set up. Can you maybe comment on that, or what your experience is with virtual teams, if they start with such a team agreement or a personal profile to be set up?
So sure, yeah, I've actually worked with some teams in helping them set this up. So I need to make a note. It takes, speaking of timings, it does take longer than expected to come to those ideas. It's one of like Harvard Business Review, they actually recommend when teams are in that, I don't want to use like the Tuckman team model of like forming, storming, but when teams are coming together, having that idea of putting together a communication charter is really critical, even if the same is all from the same time zone and the same culture, because the differences that come to the table in terms of context, culture, and character are huge. And I think it actually taps on what Berta says. It's this idea of how do we make it visible, but then how do we make it individual? So like, for example, I tossed a culture profile from Erin Meyer in the chat. She's the one who wrote the culture map, which is by no means the be all and end all of cultural analysis. I always love the quote from Ed Box that all models are wrong, but some are useful. I think that Erin Meyer's, it's a really good starting point for it, but it's just good for like raising awareness. Like I can even just pop up behind me. This is the culture map of China versus US versus Germany versus Netherlands versus Russia versus Argentina. And it goes on like, key dynamics there. Yes, thank you very much, Sveta. It's a quote from Edward Box, but the quote is actually technically wrong as well. So even all quotes are wrong. But anyways, it's like the Picasso quote, good artists borrow, great artists steal. And someone did a history of that quote and they found that Picasso actually stole that quote from a previous artist, which I always just love that history of stealing. But anyways, it's like looking at, is this high context? Is direct negative feedback more accepted? But then recognizing even within China, so direct negative feedback's not, appreciated. That being said, I have plenty of people that I work with in China where because of their culture, context, and character, their individual person, they might be totally okay with direct negative feedback. So it's just getting this awareness and bringing it to the surface and then putting together that sort of, whether you want to call it a charter or at least common understandings, and making sure that we have that perspective taking and presence of mind as we go forward. So yeah, stuff like that.
Fantastic, Joshua. Thank you so much for sharing Erin Meyer's research. You also popped in the comment section here the HBR article, so check that out as well for you. Torsten, so how do you deal with that? You are the CEO of a global company, and of course we do know, as a Danish based in the US for many years, studied together with me in Chile, South America. Of course, we have different perspectives than, for example, Sveta from Russia might be perceiving a Spanish person, or Berta might be perceiving me as an Austrian with a lot of Spanish background as well, differently. So it always depends on us, how we are perceiving the others, right? So those models that we know that Austrians are like that, it's also seen from one perspective, and cultural relativity is something super important. How do you deal with that whole culture thing in your big company? How do you do?
Yeah, and I think I can take wear the hat of the practitioner here, right? Because it's easy to get into all this, like everything depends on everything, right? Yes, it's about culture, it's about each person's, individual type, and it does. So that's the truth. But if I kind of just look at it super practically, then I think in terms of just time zones, first of all, right? I think there's roughly 3 different pockets you can be in as a team. So one is that you're in roughly the same time zones, plus minus a few hours, right? And that allows you to generally have the same normal working day, but it also allows you to do things like Friday happy hour, get a drink together, and that needs to be somewhat coordinated, right? So that's kind of the first group of time zones, is everyone is almost in the same time zone. Then there is one that is the second group, that is sort of where at least an hour or two every day, everybody's in the same time zone. So this would be example of, for instance, working together between Europe and the Americas, or Europe and Asia, but not all three at the same time, typically, right? That everybody has a couple of hours that they are overlapping or willing to be online and overlap, and that allows you to have meetings together. But for instance, it's hard to do a Friday happy hour because it's going to be morning for somebody, right? So as an example, that's the difference there. And then the third group is no overlap. And this means that you are not going to have one call or one meeting with everybody in your organization. And every big, tech company has this problem, right? Google, Facebook, and so forth. And so there you have to rely on multiple sort of duplicate sets of meetings, or you have to record them. You have to do asynchronous communication, so it's like, roughly from the practical point of view, I see them very much as these are the three groups. Now, we have in the past 5 years as Noodle been in the second of the three. So that means that we are able to have, an hour or two a day that everybody is online. And that is tremendously helpful. And that means that you can do we have a weekly meeting that we do every Monday. And that, of course, is at the time that roughly works for everybody. And I think the minute that changes, we're going to have to completely rethink how that sense of belonging to the company and the mission is communicated when you don't have that 1 hour overlap. So that's kind of the very, I think, practical layout. And I'm sort of thankful that we have never had to deal with the third time zone situation of just not having any overlap at all. If any of you guys have, I would love to hear how that works. But definitely, if you have a few hours, there's a lot you can do. I can get into that in more detail, but I think that's definitely a good practical way to think about it.
And right, Ethne, we know that there were teams, particularly, I heard from a few Malaysian colleagues that very often they were awake up 1 or 2 in the morning, right, to join our virtual conference, but also in their team meetings. And Asif just told me the other day, he woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning for whatever meeting it was.
Yeah, that's it. And I guess that is then, somehow people perceive this as, motivation or not motivation. I know we're always delighted when it comes to the end of our global virtual conference, and we still have people that are up at 3:30 in the morning and they're staying for the networking session. But I think when it comes to individuals, there's also different levels of energy, and it might not be to do with motivation at all. And these are some of the very fine differences that I think are quite difficult to pick up on in the virtual space. Torsten, I believe I remember, because I know you've joined us for one of these debriefing sessions before, and you mentioned this idea of belonging as well. And I think this takes me a little bit back to maybe the inclusion component, but belonging to an organization is really important, right, for retention of talent, etc., etc. I think I remember you saying that when you had initially sort of moved to the virtual or remote workspace, that you did also take the time once a year or twice a year to bring all the team together. In the last 2 years, has that been possible? And if not, because this is exactly, I guess, the difficulty, how do you sort of make up for that if it's really not possible to get everybody into the room together and make sure that there's that sort of sense of belonging?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. And it is true. That's exactly what we did, at least once a year, ideally twice a year, got everybody together in a big Airbnb somewhere. And thankfully, like, people have been okay with close quarters, sharing rooms and stuff that, I think takes a certain type of culture. It's not for everybody. But yes, during COVID, we haven't been able to do that, and that has taken its toll. And I think in two ways, existing team members have sort of, that energy and motivation and sense of belonging, but really also trust that you're working with people that you trust and that will do something for you. I think that just fades over time. If you have just spent a week together in a house, and we could definitely see that with existing team members. But I think what's possibly worse is that when we added new team members during COVID, they didn't meet anybody else. They didn't go to any of these fun house retreats. but not only that, they didn't meet anybody else, and they just joined. And I think it's that definitely was something that needed a lot of proactivity in order to somehow counteract. So there are two parts to that problem. Thankfully, we were just able to do one of these things. We got everyone together in Mexico here in early November, and I think that was really, really good for everyone's motivation. And I know not every organization or team have the possibility to do this, but I think we definitely have won a lot by being able to do that, and that effect lasts easily half a year. If you're able to get people together until you feel like, wow, they seem a little disconnected now, we have to do something about it.
Okay, thank you very much. Joshua, could I ask you as well, is that a practice that up until now you've been familiar with, bringing people together specifically in that to generate that sense of belonging, and alternatively, how have you managed that? I think the onboarding question is really interesting as well. And I know also with the teams that we were working with together, we had some participants who joined later. So we were putting people into teams. I know that was a difficult process as well, the whole onboarding. So it would be wonderful if you could comment on that as well.
Sure. This one I could do a little bit more briefly. I would definitely agree with Torsten on the creation of spaces. I mean, there's a ton of research that even if you're doing a distributed team, ideally, if you can get people together at least once in a shared space, it can really be a powerful bonding experience. I love the whole offsite Airbnb type way of doing it. I've gotten to do those a number of times, and they are a heck of a lot of fun, especially if you do genuinely have people doing all the different tasks for it. Like Jan Chipchase of Studio D, for all of his offsites, they literally were taking turns in the kitchen cooking the breakfast for the entire group. So it's this shared sense of commonality, and that roughness actually creates a lot more bonding there. In a virtual space, different things have been tried. How to put it? We're all beginning to grow tired of virtual escape rooms. So it's that question of how can we create more meaningful ones? I mean, not that those aren't cool. There are some really neat ones, but the novelty wears off. At the same time, though, you see people playing, like my nephew might be playing Minecraft for hours and hours, and you might be thinking, oh, he's fighting and all that kind of stuff. But they've done all these research studies, and 85% of the dialogue in those spaces is collaborative dialogue. So there is the potential to create and to have virtually collaborative team bonding experiences. How exactly that works is going back to the point of Torsten and Thierry and Berta, it depends on the team. So there isn't a one size fits all solution for that, but it really is looking at the team first and then thinking, well, how in this virtual space can we actually tailor something that really, really creates that sense?
Okay. I mean, here in the pre sort of run up to Christmas and Christmas parties, baking cookies is the whole virtual team experience. Oh dear. Yeah. Thierry, can I ask you? So you may not be a fan then of these sort of cookie baking type team building.
Everyone loves cookies.
Not everyone. No,
not making them together, but the cookies themselves, Thierry, come on.
No, but I think it needs team building. I mean, before COVID, we had these team building where you go make love to trees and end up naked singing a song. I mean, and everybody, you don't do that? Oh, okay.
No idea what you're talking about, Thierry.
Oh, but I mean, team building, I mean, it's still something touchy, because even before COVID, team building, most of the people, when you ask them, okay, you will do a team building. Yeah, great. Another one. I mean, and since it's virtual, it's even worse. But I think there is also one thing that we should not forget. Before COVID, when it was physical, you had the opportunity when you go to the office to put your mask on. Now I'm a professional one and I go to my office. So I will act the whole day as a professional one. Being stuck at home, I don't have that mask anymore. because I'm in my private environment. So it's me who's behind the screen. So the relationship is already different within the team, because it's not professionals among professionals. It's me as a person surrounded by other people as themselves, as a person, because we could do that in the beginning, because in the beginning of the COVID, we could still, even at home, have that professional mask on. But in the end, because after 2 years, everybody's tired of that. And so it's not about talking to professionals, it's talking about people. So, which is completely different, because you don't play anymore. You're really with different individual people, talking different languages, having different mindsets, having different life of problem or issue. I mean, today your kid is sick. Well, you have a babysitter, okay, but your kid is there, which you didn't have when you were in the office. And also another thing, you also have to imagine that since we are on virtual meetings and things like that, me, by example, I have maybe 50 centimeters from my screen, which means that basically you're in my private bubble. Every time I make a phone call, you're there in front of me. In real life, your face wouldn't be that close of mine. Okay, you would probably be on the other side of the desk, and we would have that safe bubble around ourselves where we can play with. Here, we don't. And I have the chance to have a desk big enough to have my screen is big enough. But can you imagine people who are with their small laptop? I mean, we don't have all the same configuration. And so all those elements are also something when you ask, yeah, let's have fun, let's make a team building. Well, you're asking that to some people who are super tired and exhausted of being online, because it's draining them so much energy, because they cannot fake it anymore. They are just forced to be there, to have those people in front of them. So yeah, if we could stop with that, that would be great. And if you do so, I totally agree with you, Joshua, those virtual escape room, please stop that shit. But there is one thing that we did a few times, and we don't put it like something that comes weekly or monthly. Okay, it's really, okay, I feel the need to do that, and I call them. It's a virtual lunch, but the real one. So all we do, we prepare a plate, we sit, we make a group call, we turn the camera on, and we eat together. It sounds, and as a manager, I say, that's stupid. I mean, we can do that no matter when we want. So that's not really a team building. But you know what? For people, that's a team building. And your role as a manager, or when you're a leading team, is to also understand that sometimes, what we said, keep it simple. You don't need the wow effect to make your team be motivated and following you into some team building things. No, this is why understanding who you work with is important. Sometimes people just need to have one call of 30 minutes all together while they're eating their sandwich or plate, and that's it. And you need to keep that in mind. Indeed, it's not the professional word that we knew in the beginning, where you could organize a lot of things. And yeah, the Airbnb things is really cool and really fun. Unfortunately, all the companies don't do that. I would love NTT to organize like a big Christmas party in an Airbnb. I don't know how it would end.
Oh my God, how many thousands of employees can we get into this Airbnb?
But keep just in mind that everything you organize today doesn't have the same perspective as before the COVID, because before the COVID, you were organizing things within a team of professionals, and you gave them that opportunity to, during 2 or 3 days or 1 day, to not be professional anymore, to be themselves at work with their colleague. The thing is that today, that's what we do every day. We are ourselves like we are with our colleague. So coming back with one more day and doing it somewhere else, for some people, yeah, it's great, I will see real people because I miss that. For others, what's the point? And you need to take that into consideration, I think.
I know my students who are here will be listening to you thinking, yes, we are all exhausted. No, we don't want to put our cameras on anymore. Enough of these attempts to get me to interact. And I remember actually this time last year, because obviously at the end of the year, everybody is, you know, has had enough of sort of being on screen all the time. And I remember we were sitting during this session last year, and I had my headphones on, and I could hear like a noise in the background, and it was a fire alarm. And I thought, oh no, I hope the woman downstairs isn't burning the apartment down. And I sat on, and we were in this, and the door was closed. And then we were talking about mindfulness and taking care of yourself. And then I thought, oh, the alarm is still going off. So I used a quiet moment to take my headphones off, and literally my apartment was practically burning down. With the headphones, I hadn't realized it was my own fire alarm. And then so that moves me now into this very nice sort of question of how we manage to stay sort of healthy and well, and when we're too much online. And Berta, I'd really love to know from you also, because I know you're also surveying employees and finding out, you know, how people are doing, and this sort of well-being is included so much now, also in terms of all aspects of human resource management, learning and development. So what can we do? Note I'm not wearing my earphones, the big headset anymore.
Okay, so regarding well-being, for example, some of the activities that we proposed to all the employees along the company were like from mindfulness sessions in different time zones, of course, so everyone could attend, for example, and those were quite successful. We had quite a lot of people attending them. Not only that, but also we created like a coffee place, like a coffee house in a virtual setting. So people could just enter in different time zones as well. And there was like a common topic to talk about each day. So, I mean, every person from any part of the world in the company could connect and just, hey, hello, okay, let's talk about board games today, or let's talk about visiting places today. And we made different small groups, so the chat was easier, not with a huge group. And many other activities like different. We made talks about technical interesting points. We made, I mean, there were so many different activities that maybe at the beginning we thought, okay, this is the problem that you mentioned before. Let's keep it simple. Maybe we have too many things to choose, and we need to just offer a couple of them, the ones that people really ask for. So that was the beginning at March 2020, April, and the first 2-3 months. And then we just left some of them that people were really attending to. And what we are doing now that people is actually, you know, coming back to the offices and having telework as well. We are trying to have hybrid spaces. So we are developing a hybrid work methodology for working, and make everyone feel involved and included, no matter if you decide to go 3 days per week to the office or stay home for the whole week.
Okay, that's really nice. We also have here at the university, we have a student physiotherapist, and they took over this idea as well. And they've sort of introduced, and it's planned into all employees' schedules, this sort of 2 o'clock, take a break. And initially they started doing sort of back exercises and a little bit of sort of seat, you know, yoga. I think this is a really, sorry.
No, just let me say that with the physiotherapist, you remind me that we included that as well. And we included a service with a team of psychologists in case that some people wanted to ask for, you know, mental health support.
Super. Perfect. Torsten, thank you. I see you'd like to come in here as well.
Yeah, I think this topic of mental well-being when you know, when you're remote, but also I think at all times when you're in any kind of organization that needs to get some stuff done, right? It is a tough one. And I think when you're remote, particularly, it's hard. And I think we've seen it all during COVID, that when people, including all of us, are isolated at home for parts of this time, you go through a lot of the same issues, but they actually feel a lot worse because you're by yourself. And I think, yes, you can do different initiatives, but at the end of the day, a lot of this, in my opinion, comes down to culture and what culture you allow your organization to have, so that it becomes sort of okay to talk about going through difficult times. It becomes okay to support one another, and that it's okay that occasionally we're not all at our peak sort of performance. For those of you that have managed teams or are managing teams, you will know that everybody goes through stuff, right? Somebody will go through a breakup. Somebody has parents that get COVID or get somebody passes away, like a family passes away, or financial troubles, especially like diverse teams, all sorts of people. There's just all sorts of stuff that happens, and I think that definitely, as you're distributed, will if you're already not in a good place and something bad happens to you, that can be really detrimental. And I think I'm not always the best at picking that out in my own team, of understanding, are people in a good place? And part of it is just my own. I'm also slightly introvert. I'm an engineer by training, but I think it's also about being the co-founder CEO. It just means I often see a picture of people want to present themselves well. But luckily, I have other people in the team that are really good and that are sort of trusted points that are able to collect and figure out, hang on, this is not, something is not going well over here. And I think having that culture where it is very much accepted to be going through a difficult time, and it's very much accepted to talk to the coworkers you want to about it, and that it's also accepted that it reaches management without any dire consequences, I think is probably one of the best tools in the book to make sure this is possible during such a difficult time as COVID has been. So I just want to add that piece to Betta's comments. I think it's very valid, but that's definitely culture is everything for me, at least in this process.
Okay, and it's really where people can be their authentic selves then within the organization. I think this is a really nice place actually for us, or round for us to close on. So if it's okay, I would also move on, Joshua and Thierry, and also ask you for your practices in terms of simply staying well when you're constantly in this virtual space. Thierry's laughing. It's not baking biscuits, okay?
No, I think, well, don't get me wrong, but the way I found to really stay sane and mentally sane in that situation is to be stupid and lazy. It means that I try to really keep it the simplest possible. Every interaction I have to do with my team, the way we work, the way we build the things. The stupidest, the better. So the simplest, the better. And being lazy, it means that put the energy where you need it. Don't waste your energy on things just because everybody does it, or just because you have seen something and because someone asked you to do it. No, be a bit smart. I mean, understand why you need to do the things, what do you need to do, who do you need to present that to, and how will you do it. The tool is just the last thing you need to think of. But for yourself, be the stupid guy in the room, because then you will simplify everything and you will find simple solution. And be lazy. It's do things that don't take too much energy, because there are fights where you will need all your energy and you need to be fully operational for those specific moments. So yeah, and with that, accept also the fact to say, you know what, fuck it, I will go for a walk. I will. My daughter comes and say, Dad, I want to kiss. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, come, let's hug. My dog needs to pee. Let's go for a walk. I mean, accept it, do it, and you see, it's it makes your life much easier.
Wonderful, thank you, Joshua.
Yeah, so I think, Thierry, you'd love a quote. Daniel Stillman, who's one of the I know that Barbara knows him, but he's one of the facilitators that I really like a lot. He loves the term the lazy facilitator, and he uses that as a positive term. It's this, which I fully agree with. And it's this idea that oftentimes, and he's speaking in facilitation, but it's true in a lot of work, we just have this intense, tense worship at the cult of busyness, where it's just like, go, 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 where it's how can we actually transfer ownership of the conversation to those around us, and how can we actually share the load and not have this momentous idea that we need to take on every task-oriented burden, and put bounding boxes on it. I love the fact that wasn't it Portugal that said you can't email people outside of work hours and stuff or something like that?
Totally,
Portugal.
Fantastic.
Good job, Portugal. So that kind of stuff, personally doing that, definitely having, like, for example, even with my emails, I've got it literally set up so I won't ever email people outside of their time zones and stuff. It's set to send in a reasonable time zone. I've got all my markers there, but I've even got like devices on my computers. I've got an app called Freedom that I've installed, which doesn't allow me on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, etc. anytime for about 9 or 10 hours a day. It just blocks it. And I've got it locked down so it has, there's no way of undoing it without breaking my computer. Got it on my phone as well. So I've put bounding boxes on my reality to force myself to go on walks and watch other people's dogs go pee, since I don't have a dog. But there's a lot of dogs in Hong Kong, and if you go on the morning trail, Thierry, here, if you go on a run up there, trust me, you will. They are also going pee on that trail.
Well, I would love to visit Hong Kong.
Please do. We have lots of nature here, actually, surprisingly a lot. Come see. Anyways, yeah. So exactly what you're all saying.
Super, thank you. Well, as soon as we can hop on planes properly again with our too many restrictions. I think somebody had their hand raised, but then took it down again. I'm not sure. If you do have a question, please put your hand up as we're coming to the end. I'd love to also pass over to the Global Case Study Management team and see how they cope and what sort of coping strategies and mindfulness and well-being strategies you use, even though I think I know some of them already because we have a weekend of it behind us, right?
Absolutely. That's really great, Ethne. So Joshua, I definitely have never heard about Freedom, but I need to check that out. I love the idea of that. And I think I need also some sort of more freedom here on my desktop. Just to share my coping strategy is really to take afternoons or mornings off. And I do know that we all are so busy in front of the computer, and we do not allow ourselves really to go out for a 45 minutes walk, even though we know that we might come back much more relaxed, with more energy, with the battery full. And also for me, you must imagine I'm an entrepreneur. So for me, it's always like going away. It's like something, dear God, should I really do that? Because my clients, and I have this to do, and I'm always back with my work. But at the end, it's also the freedom and liberty that I have as being an entrepreneur and running my own company, that I can decide on when to work. And so for me, the walks at the beach, definitely. Sveta, handing over to you.
One of the strategies that we were all tackling, I think, is specifically related to being resilient in this time. I think all of our guest speakers today, managers, commented on the fact that at the end of the day, we're human. Right? And we have an amazing capacity to follow through and to go through all of this uncertain times. But we always have to remember that everybody is going through these uncertain times. The amount of the stress and conflict that we have managed in the last 2 years is more than probably all the conflicts that we've managed as a team in the last decade when we were working individually. And let's keep it in mind that people are going through stress right now, and let's be emotionally intelligent and recognize that and just put it in practice, really, and make space for solving the conflicts. And this is our coping strategy. We've been doing a lot of this year, and I think our managers could agree with that, right? Thank you. Anna?
Definitely for me, I was practicing the same as Barbara, walking on the beach, but we moved away from the beach. And now for me, what is really nice, and when it's sunny, I would like to, and sometimes I sit down and I would work and have meetings from the sun. And it's definitely vitamin D. It's something that also gives you energy and motivates. And it's something that we all need in order to cope with the stress as well. So just on the biological level. But at the same time, but it's really, really important. And my team knows that sometimes on Saturdays I never reply. For example, despite the fact we were talking about how many messages when you have to be replying on certain messages, Saturday would be the day where I am just not working and not replying on my messaging, on WhatsApp communication and other things. So the just one day off from all their work and communication is something that's really helping to deal with the stress that you are saying. And Esne, coming back to you as well, you haven't shared your coping strategy.
Yeah, well, I also try to take short breaks during the day, and really, my husband is constantly at me, move, you've been sitting now for 45 minutes or for an hour and a half, time to move. And that's actually really useful, is just having somebody else who is sharing with you and making sure as well that you're thinking about these things. So that's one of the things that I do. And what I do as well is I really just plan in some time for friends. I mean, I have 3 kids, they keep me busy anyway, so they tear me away from everything, which is absolutely fantastic. But I try to make sure that I have a little bit of time for those social contacts, and whether that's a walk, or even if I take my phone and have a chat and walk with them, I'll do that.
We are big fans of walking meetings, and you also know that in many organizations they already try to use them more often in order to be off screen. If it's possible, there is one person who is taking the minutes while this can be also rotating and the others are walking, and maybe there's also somebody who doesn't need to take the minutes, or you just record that session so that everybody can be really walking. With that, also let us know, I see some of you already shared, what are you doing to cope with your stress? Some of you are working, some of you are only studying, many of you also have families and friends. How do you deal with the stress, and how do you make sure that you are doing well and staying well? We've seen a lot of cases of virtual fatigue last year, so let us know in the chat. I'm just checking in here. Maura is saying she likes swimming, trail running. Joshua, thanks a lot for sharing. Going out for a coffee as a coping strategy, socializing. Maura, thanks again. Some totally screenless time and a must outdoor activity. Berta, fantastic. And not to-do list instead of a to-do list. Sharing food online with everybody, fantastic. What about the others? So give us a few more comments there. What are you doing to stay well while you're working virtually, or while you're studying virtually? Lasse is also saying here, a quick run to free his mind. Fantastic.
And no dancing, Barbara, no dancing yet.
But yoga, well, yoga 3-4 times a week now is fantastic. Lego from Terry, wow, using Lego, interesting. Listening to music, meditating, the nature and the sea, journaling. Olivia, fantastic. Working out in the breaks, which is great. Legos are great, totally agree. Fantastic. Thank you very, very much to everyone for joining us today. Thanks also again, a big applause now to our expert panel here. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And also to those of you there who want to connect with our expert speakers, our expert panels, go to LinkedIn. There we have one post where you can connect with them. They're for sure happy to also get a quick comment under the post. So go there, give us a like and a quick comment under the post. Thank you, Torsten, Joshua, Berta, and Thierry for joining us. Martin, that is lovely. Don't be sad. We are here, we stay here, and you can also join as a free floating student next year, right, Ethne?
Absolutely, yeah. Or join some of our open sessions. So we'd love to keep in touch and see also how you're doing. So maybe we'll organize some virtual sessions during the year, and you can come back and join us. Congratulations to everybody. It was an absolute pleasure working with everybody, since this is the last time we get to say goodbye to you. Absolutely fantastic. Hopefully you will take some of the learnings with you and apply them as you move forward with your careers and with your education. And I will hand over to Sveta to say goodbye.
Thank you very much. Stay healthy, okay? Stay focused and keep moving forward. All right.
Anna, a few words at the end.
Thank you so much. Amazing discussion. And I think it's so beneficial for our students to graduate from Global Case Study Challenge in 2021 edition. Thanks a lot for everyone for contributing and making it possible. And then we have Joshua here that is also making it fun for us in the last.
Dear God, sad faces. So don't just log out, but unmute yourself and shout out goodbye in your preferred language. So let us hear you and don't just take off. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
And thank you to our experts.
Grazie, ciao.
Thank you.
Grazie.
It was
Bye-bye.
great.
Bye.
Adios, gracias.
Hello.
Yay.
До свидания.
До свидания.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Побачення. Ходохофес.
It's a beautiful quote, Thierry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.